For 3 heartbeats, they simply stared at each other across the falling snow. Paige watched as his eyes narrowed, taking in the scene, the girl on the curb, the soaked coat, the empty station, the snow accumulating around her like a burial shroud. His jaw tightened. He moved toward her, footsteps crunching in fresh snow, and she could see the exact moment genuine alarm crossed his features. "Are you all right?" His voice was deep, rough with concern that sounded real. Paige tried to answer. Her mouth opened, but her teeth were chattering so violently the words came out broken. "I'm waiting for someone." It was a pathetic lie. They both knew it. The man's eyes flicked to the empty parking lot, to the snow that was now several inches deep and still falling. "How long have you been out here?" She didn't answer. Couldn't. He stepped closer, and she saw his expression shift from concern to something sharper. Fear. "Your hands are blue." It wasn't a question. It was a diagnosis delivered with certainty. "You're going into hypothermia." Before she could protest, he was already shrugging out of his coat, the expensive wool coat that probably cost thousands. He draped it over her shoulders, and the warmth that clung to the fabric hit her like a physical force. Paige almost sobbed with relief. The heat was so intense, so unexpected that it hurt, her frozen skin burning as blood rushed back to the surface. "Come with me." It wasn't a request. It was a command wrapped in gentleness, firm but not harsh. "I'll protect you." Paige knew she shouldn't. Every safety rule her grandmother had ever taught her screamed in her head. Don't get in cars with strangers. Don't trust men you don't know. But as she looked up at those gray eyes, eyes that actually saw her, eyes that held real concern instead of the empty sliding past everyone else had given her tonight, something inside her chest cracked. Or maybe it healed. She didn't know. "I don't," her voice was barely a whisper, throat raw from cold. "I don't know you." The man crouched down so they were eye level. Up close, she could see the sharp lines of his face, the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, the snow gathering on his eyelashes. He extended his hand. "Henry Renford." His voice was steady, calm. "And you're freezing to death on Christmas Eve. We can do formal introductions after I make sure you keep all your fingers." There was the faintest hint of dry humor in his tone, but the worry underneath was absolute. Paige looked at his outstretched hand, strong, steady, offering salvation. She looked back at the empty station behind her, the place where Marcus had never come, the place where she had almost let herself disappear. She thought about dying alone in the cold. And she made the most impulsive decision of her entire life. She took his hand. His grip was warm, solid, real. He helped her to her feet, keeping a firm hold on her arm when her legs nearly gave out. The world tilted, and she felt his other hand steady her back. "Paige." Her voice was barely audible, but he heard it. "My name is Paige." "All right, Paige." Henry guided her toward the car, his movements gentle but purposeful. "Let's get you out of the cold." He opened the passenger door and heat rushed out to greet her. The interior was warm, leather seats soft beneath her as she half collapsed into them. Henry leaned across to buckle her seatbelt, his movements efficient, careful. Then he was in the driver's seat, pulling away from the curb, leaving the empty station behind. Paige turned to look out the back window, watching the place where she had almost died grow smaller in the distance. Marcus had never come. But someone had. And somehow, impossibly, that changed everything. Paige had no idea what waited for her in Henry's penthouse, no idea that this stranger would see parts of her no one else had ever noticed, no idea that in just 3 days, her entire understanding of love, trust, and her own worth would be shattered and rebuilt. But first, she had to survive the night. And as Henry's car disappeared into the snow-covered city, one question burned in both their minds: why had he stopped? Why, out of everyone who passed that freezing girl on the curb, had Henry Renford been the one who couldn't drive away? Stay with me for part 2, where Paige wakes up in a world she doesn't recognize, where a billionaire makes her breakfast and asks questions no one has ever asked before. And where Marcus finally calls back, 12 hours too late. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, let me catch you up. Paige Morgan was abandoned in the snow on Christmas Eve by her boyfriend Marcus. Freezing, alone, with no phone, no wallet, and no one coming to save her, she was rescued by a stranger, Henry Renford, a billionaire CEO who couldn't explain why he stopped his car. He took her to his penthouse. He gave her warmth, safety, and something she hadn't felt in years, the sense that someone actually saw her. But now it's morning. And Paige is about to discover that Henry's kindness isn't just charity. It's something far more dangerous. It's connection. Real, raw, undeniable connection. And when Marcus finally calls, 12 hours too late, everything Paige thought she knew about love is about to explode. The morning after, Paige woke up disoriented. For a moment, she didn't recognize where she was. The room was too big, the bed too soft, the light streaming through the windows illuminating skyscrapers instead of her usual view of a dirty alley. Then it all came back, the snow, Henry, the penthouse. She sat up quickly, panic rising. What time was it? How long had she slept? She was wearing a t-shirt that clearly belonged to Henry, enormous on her, smelling of masculine soap and something indefinable that made her stomach do strange flips. A soft knock on the door. "Paige, are you awake?" Henry's voice. "Can I come in?" "Yes," she managed. Henry entered carrying a tray. "Coffee, toast, scrambled eggs. Thought you might be hungry." He placed the tray on the bed carefully, keeping a respectful distance. In daylight, Paige really saw him for the first time. He was younger than she'd initially thought, maybe late 20s, early 30s, handsome in an aristocratic way, with those gray eyes that seemed to see right through her. "What time is it?" she asked, grabbing the coffee gratefully. "Noon. You slept almost 12 hours. He sat in the chair near the window. "Your body needed it. How are you feeling?" "Better." "Embarrassed?" Paige couldn't meet his eyes. "I'm so sorry for invading your Christmas like this. You probably had plans and I didn't," Henry interrupted gently. "I was coming back from a boring business dinner when I saw you. And I'm grateful I did." Paige finally looked at him. "Why?" "Because no one should be alone and freezing on Christmas Eve. And because," he hesitated as if weighing his words, "something about you made me stop the car. Normally, I would have just called emergency services and kept driving. But I couldn't leave you there." The air between them grew heavy with something Paige couldn't name. Her phone, which Henry had put on charge overnight, suddenly rang on the nightstand. She picked it up, saw the name on the screen, and felt her stomach sink. Marcus. 17 missed calls. 23 messages. She opened the most recent one. "Where the hell are you? I went to pick you up this morning and you weren't there. This is ridiculous, Paige. Call me now." Paige felt rage, pure incandescent rage, burn through her. He went to get her this morning. 12 hours later. After she'd spent the entire night in the cold. "Everything okay?" Henry's voice brought her back. Paige looked at him, this man who was essentially a stranger but who had shown more care in 12 hours than Marcus had in 2 years. "It's him. Marcus. He finally showed up this morning." Her voice trembled with suppressed emotion. 12 hours too late. Henry said nothing, just waited. And somehow that silence gave Paige courage. She dialed Marcus's number. He answered on the first ring. "Hello, Marcus. It's me. It's Paige." A pause. "Paige, whose phone are you using?" "That's what you're asking?" Her voice cracked. You were supposed to pick me up last night. 12 hours ago. I was waiting in the snow. My phone died. Where were you? Another pause. Longer this time. Then Marcus sighed. Actually sighed like she was inconveniencing him. Look, babe. Something came up. The guys wanted to hit the bar for Christmas Eve. I figured you'd just grab an Uber or something. The room tilted. He hadn't forgotten. He had chosen a bar over her. Chosen his friends over making sure she was safe. I didn't have my wallet, Paige whispered. It was stolen. Well, how was I supposed to know that? Marcus's tone shifted to defensive. You're always so independent. I thought you'd figure it out. Are you seriously calling me now to guilt-trip me about this? Paige looked at Henry. His expression was cold, controlled fury. We're done, Marcus. The words came out steady, final. Don't call me. Don't text me. We're done. What? Paige, come on. Don't be dramatic. She ended the call. Her hands were shaking. She had just ended a 2-year relationship in 30 seconds. She should feel regret, should feel fear. But all she felt was light, as if she'd released a weight she'd been carrying for years. Are you okay? Henry asked gently. Paige looked at him. Really looked at the way he watched her with genuine concern, at how he maintained respectful distance even in his own apartment, at how he'd stopped his car last night when everyone else simply passed by. I don't know, she admitted honestly. But I think I will be. The smile Henry gave her was small, but it completely transformed his face. Good. Because I made Christmas turkey. Too much for one person, and it would be a shame to waste it. There was an implicit invitation there, spend Christmas Day together. Two strangers connected by a moment of need. Paige knew she should leave, should go back to her small apartment, process everything that had happened. But when Henry stood and extended his hand, that gesture that was becoming familiar, she took it. Christmas turkey sounds perfect. Dinner was surreal. They ate at the elegant dining table, snow still falling softly outside, the entire city wrapped in festive silence. Henry was an excellent cook. The turkey was perfect, the sides delicious. But what really surprised Paige was the conversation. They talked about everything and nothing. Henry told her about growing up an only child to absent parents, building a business empire in his 20s as a way to prove his worth. Renford Industries, he said when Paige asked. Medical technology. We develop equipment that saves lives. There was pride in his voice, but also something else. Loneliness, perhaps. And you? He asked. What do you do when you're not being abandoned in the snow? Paige laughed, though the question still stung. I work at a bookstore. Nothing glamorous. But I love books. I love how they can transport you anywhere, let you be anyone. Escapism, Henry observed. Not judgment, just understanding. Sometimes the real world is too much. Sometimes, Paige agreed softly. For a moment, their eyes met across the table, and there was an understanding there. Two strangers discovering they might not be so strange to each other after all. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Henry turned on the fireplace with a remote control, and Paige couldn't help but laugh. Of course you have a remote control fireplace. Are you mocking my technology? There was humor in his voice. A little. They sat on the couch. Not close, but not far either. The conversation deepened, became more honest. Henry talked about his mother, who'd died 5 years ago from cancer, who'd always told him he worked too much, that he needed to find someone to share his life with. Why are you? Paige asked. Alone, I mean. Because it's easier, Henry answered honestly. Relationships require vulnerability, trust. And in my world, trust is dangerous currency. He looked at her. But you understand that, don't you? That's why you stayed with Marcus even when he clearly didn't value you. Because being alone seemed scarier than being with the wrong person. The words hit Paige like a punch. Because he was right. Absolutely right. How do you know that? Paige whispered. Henry studied her for a long moment. Because I recognize it. That wound of not feeling enough. Of seeking external validation because the internal is broken. He leaned slightly closer. But can I tell you something I learned building a company from nothing? Paige nodded, unable to speak. You don't need someone to make you whole. You're already whole. You just need to believe it. Tears burned in Paige's eyes. No one had ever said anything like that to her. No one had ever seen her like this. You're stronger than you think, Paige. Last night in the cold, you didn't give up. Today, you ended a relationship that was destroying you. That's courage. He wiped away a tear that escaped. The touch was brief, but it set every nerve in her body on fire. Don't diminish yourself just because someone was too stupid to see your worth. The silence that followed was charged. Paige was acutely aware of how close they were now, how his warmth seemed to fill all the space between them. I should go, she said suddenly, standing up, because if she stayed one more minute, she'd do something stupid, like lean in and find out if his lips were as soft as they looked. Henry stood too. Do you have somewhere to go? The question was gentle but direct, and Paige realized her apartment was tiny, cold, full of memories of Marcus. The idea of going back there today felt unbearable. I have an apartment. That's not what I asked. Henry studied her. Stay. At least tonight. I have plenty of rooms. And tomorrow, if you want to leave, I won't stop you. Paige knew she should refuse. But when she looked around at the warm apartment, at the glowing tree, at Henry watching her with those gray eyes that made her heart race, she realized she didn't want to go. Not yet. Okay, she whispered. One more night. And the smile Henry gave her was worth every second of uncertainty. Paige stayed. Not just that night, but the next day, and the day after that. And with each passing hour, the connection between her and Henry deepened. But nothing in life is simple. Because while Paige was falling for a man who saw her, really saw her for the first time in her life, danger was lurking. Her grandmother Eleanor, her only family, was about to have a medical emergency. And Henry's ex-fiancée, Victoria, beautiful, polished, and determined, was about to show up at his door with one mission: get Henry back. And she wasn't going to let some random girl stand in her way. In part 3, everything comes to a head. Paige will have to decide, is this connection real, or has she simply replaced one dependency with another? Can Henry prove he's different from Marcus? And when tragedy strikes, will their fragile bond survive? Don't miss the conclusion. Welcome to the final part of Paige and Henry's story. So far, we've watched Paige go from freezing alone on Christmas Eve to discovering what it feels like to be truly seen by someone. Henry Renford, the billionaire CEO who stopped his car when no one else would, has become more than her rescuer. He's become her mirror, reflecting back a version of herself she'd forgotten existed, strong, valuable, worthy of love. But fairy tales don't exist in vacuums. And now, the real world is about to crash into their fragile connection with the force of a freight train. An ex-fiancé who won't take no for an answer. A grandmother rushed to the hospital. And a question that will haunt Paige: is Henry's kindness real love, or just another form of charity? This is where everything changes. This is where Paige discovers who she really is. The unexpected guest. 3 days after Christmas, Paige was curled up on Henry's couch reading when the intercom buzzed. She hesitated. It wasn't her place to answer. But when it buzzed again, insistently, she stood and pressed the button. Yes? Where is Henry Renford? The voice was female, sharp, commanding. This is his apartment. Paige froze. He's at work. Can I help you? You can let me up now. Something in the voice made Paige obey instinctively. She pressed the button, then ran to check herself in the mirror. Messy hair, wearing leggings and one of Henry's t-shirts. Great. The elevator opened and a woman stepped out. Tall, slim, designer dress, impeccable blonde hair, beautiful in an intimidating way. Her eyes swept over Paige from head to toe, and the disapproval was palpable. Who are you? The woman asked without preamble. And what are you doing in Henry's apartment wearing his clothes? Paige felt her face heat. I'm a friend. My name is Paige. A friend? The woman laughed, a humorless sound. Henry doesn't have friends. He has business associates and women who stay one night. She removed her coat, tossing it on the couch as if she owned the place. So which are you? I'm sorry, but who are you? Paige found the courage to ask. The woman raised an eyebrow. Victoria Ashford. Henry's fiancée. Paige's world stopped. Excuse me? Well, ex-fiancée, Victoria corrected with a casual wave. We broke up 6 months ago. But Henry and I have history. And after thinking about it over the holidays, I realized I made a mistake. I came to get him back. She studied Paige with sharp eyes. And you, whoever you are in my way. Paige's phone was in her hands before she realized it, dialing Henry. He answered on the third ring. Paige, is everything okay? Henry, there's a woman here. Victoria. She says she's your ex-fiancée. The silence on the line was deafening. Then, quietly, damn. I'm coming home now. Don't let her intimidate you. I'll explain everything. Victoria had clearly heard the conversation. She smiled, predatory. He didn't tell you about me. How interesting. Let me guess, he found you in some sad situation, played the white knight, and now you think there's something special between you. Every word was a knife, because that was exactly what had happened. I've known Henry for 10 years, Victoria continued, circling Paige like a predator. We grew up in the same circles. I understand his world, his ambitions, his needs. You? She laughed. You're a Christmas charity project. Once the novelty wears off, he'll realize we're meant for each other. Paige felt nausea rising because Victoria was just voicing her own fears, that this was too good to be true, that Henry would realize she didn't belong in this world. Before she could respond, the elevator opened. Henry practically ran out, tie loose, face flushed. His eyes went immediately to Paige, checking if she was okay, before turning to Victoria. What are you doing here? His voice was cold as ice. What followed was brutal. Victoria tried to seduce, to manipulate, to reclaim what she thought was hers. Henry was firm, definitive, telling her there was no us, that she'd ended things 6 months ago via text, that he'd moved on. But Victoria's parting words landed like bombs. She'll disappoint you, Henry. She doesn't belong in your world. And when she does, I'll be here. After Victoria left, Henry turned to Paige, who was trembling. Paige, I'm so sorry. I didn't know she would come. We broke up months ago, Anne. Is she right? Paige interrupted, her voice breaking. Am I just a charity project? Will you get tired of me and realize she was better? Henry closed the distance between them in 3 steps, holding her face between his hands. Listen to me very carefully. Victoria was convenient. Our families knew each other. She understood the business world. But it was never real. It never felt, he searched for the words. It never felt like you feel. And then he kissed her. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was desperate, urgent, loaded with 3 days of unresolved tension. Henry's lips moved against hers hungrily, like he was dying of thirst and she was water. Paige gasped, and he took advantage, deepening the kiss. One hand tangled in her hair, the other firm on her back, pulling her closer. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Henry rested his forehead against hers. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "Don't apologize," Paige's voice came out hoarse. "Please don't apologize. When everything falls apart." They spent the next hour talking. Henry explained everything about Victoria, about why the relationship had never worked, about why Paige was different. And Paige, for the first time, believed him. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Paige Morgan?" A formal female voice. "Yes, this is St. Mary's Hospital. Your grandmother, Eleanor Morgan, was admitted to the emergency room an hour ago. She gave us your name as her contact. Could you come as soon as possible?" The world stopped. "What happened? Is she okay?" "The doctor will explain when you arrive." "But it's serious, Miss Morgan." The phone slipped from Paige's hand. Henry caught it, processing the situation instantly. "The hospital. Your grandmother?" Paige nodded, unable to speak, panic rising. "I need to go now, but I don't have a car, and public transportation." Henry pulled her into his arms. "Breathe. We'll figure this out." He grabbed his phone. "We're going together. I'll take you." "You don't have to." "I know. But I'm going anyway, because you shouldn't be alone in this." "Not anymore." The hospital was sterile, cold, fluorescent. Eleanor had suffered a stroke. Small, but at 82, any stroke was serious. The doctor explained, the next 48 hours were critical. If she made it through, recovery would be slow, requiring constant care, physical therapy, possibly speech therapy. When Paige was finally allowed to see her, Eleanor looked tiny in the hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines. But she was conscious. Her fingers squeezed weakly when Paige took her hand. "Paige," her voice was scratchy, weak. "My girl. Did you find someone?" Her eyes went to Henry standing in the doorway. "Is he good?" Paige laughed through tears. "Yes, Grandma. He's good. Good." Eleanor closed her eyes. "You deserve to be happy. Deserve to be loved." Back in the car, Paige was silent. Henry drove, casting worried glances. When they stopped in front of his building, neither moved. "Thank you," Paige finally said. "For coming with me. For staying. You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Henry replied simply. "Paige, look at me." When she did, there was something intense in his eyes. "What your grandmother said about you deserving to be happy, to be loved. She's right. And he hesitated. "I'm not saying I'm in love with you. That would be ridiculous. It's been 3 days. But I am saying there's something here, something real. And I want to see where it can lead, if you'll let me." Paige's heart was beating so hard she could barely think. Every rational part of her was screaming to go slow, to protect herself, to remember that 3 days wasn't enough to know someone. But then she thought about Marcus, who she'd known for 2 years and who never really saw her. And she looked at Henry, who in 3 days knew her better than Marcus ever did. "I'm scared," she admitted honestly. "Scared this is too good to be true. Scared I'll wake up and find it was just a temporary Christmas fantasy." Henry held her face gently. "Then let's find out together. Slowly. No pressure." "But Paige," he brushed his thumb across her lower lip, "I kissed you because I couldn't not kiss you anymore. And if you let me, I'll kiss you again and again until you have no doubt this is real." Before Paige could respond, her phone rang again. The hospital. Eleanor had stabilized. She was going to make it. Relief flooded through Paige so powerfully she started crying. Henry pulled her into his arms, and she let herself be held, really held, by someone who chose to stay. 6 months later. 6 months later, Paige stood in the same penthouse that had once been Henry's alone but was now unmistakably theirs. Eleanor was doing physical therapy 3 times a week, living in a care facility Henry insisted on paying for, despite Paige's protests. She'd eventually accepted, understanding that love sometimes meant letting people help you. Paige still worked at the bookstore, but now she was also taking online classes in literature. Henry had encouraged her, told her she was too smart to settle. And slowly, Paige was starting to believe him. Their relationship wasn't perfect. They argued about Henry working too much. Paige sometimes still doubted she belonged in his world. But every time those doubts crept in, Henry was there, reminding her that she wasn't a charity project. She was a choice. His choice. Every single day. And Paige had learned something crucial: being rescued once didn't make her weak. It made her human. Everyone needs someone to stop the car, to offer their hand, to say, "I see you." The strength came in what she did after, choosing to heal, choosing to grow, choosing to believe she was worthy of love. As she stood looking out at the city, Henry's arms wrapped around her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured against her hair. "Christmas Eve," Paige said softly. "How cold I was. How alone I felt. How I almost gave up." Henry tightened his hold. "And now?" Paige turned in his arms, looking up at those gray eyes that had seen her from the very first moment. "Now I understand that sometimes the worst nights lead to the best mornings. Sometimes being broken open is the only way to let the light in." Henry kissed her forehead. "I'm glad I stopped that car. I'm glad I took your hand. And in the end, that's what love was, 2 people choosing each other, again and again, through cold nights and warm mornings, through doubt and certainty, through fear and courage. It wasn't about being saved. It was about being seen. And choosing to see in return. A message to you. Dear listener, thank you for staying with Paige and Henry's story from beginning to end. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that even in the coldest, darkest moments, hope can find you, I have one request. Please subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and which moment touched you most. Your engagement helps me keep telling stories that matter, stories that remind us we're not alone in this complicated, beautiful journey of being human. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message today, someone who feels invisible or unworthy or alone, share this story with them. Sometimes we all need a reminder that we're enough, exactly as we are. The life lesson. What we can learn from Paige and Henry's story. 1. Your worth doesn't depend on someone else's ability to see it. Paige spent 2 years with Marcus, who made her feel invisible. She started believing she wasn't enough. But the truth is, Marcus's blindness said everything about him and nothing about her. You are not diminished by someone's failure to value you. You are simply hidden from someone who lacks the capacity to appreciate what they have. 2. The right person will show up, not when everything is perfect, but when you're at your most vulnerable. Henry didn't meet Paige at her best. He met her freezing, desperate, at rock bottom. And he chose her anyway. Real love doesn't wait for you to have it all together. It shows up in the mess and says, "I see you. All of you. And you're worth staying for." 3. Being rescued doesn't make you weak, staying broken does. There's no shame in accepting help when you need it. The strength comes in what you do with that help. Do you use it as a crutch forever, or do you use it as a bridge to becoming stronger? Paige could have stayed dependent on Henry. Instead, she went back to school, ended a toxic relationship, fought for her own healing. That's courage. 4. Trust isn't about blind faith, it's about consistent action. Paige didn't trust Henry because he said the right things. She trusted him because he showed up, again and again. He drove her to the hospital. He held her when she cried. He protected her from Victoria's cruelty. Trust is built in moments when someone could walk away but chooses to stay. 5. Sometimes the worst night of your life is the gateway to the best chapter. If Marcus had shown up that Christmas Eve, Paige would still be settling for breadcrumbs of affection. She would still be shrinking herself to fit into someone else's narrow definition of acceptable. Sometimes what feels like abandonment is actually liberation. Sometimes the door that closes is making room for a window that opens onto something infinitely better. The core message. You don't need someone to complete you. You need someone who reminds you that you were always complete. The right person doesn't fix you. They help you remember that you were never broken, just unseen. And when you finally meet someone who sees you, really sees you, everything changes. Not because they saved you, but because they gave you permission to save yourself. So if you're sitting in your own version of that cold station right now, waiting for someone who isn't coming, know this: your Marcus was never your person. He was your lesson. And your Henry? He's out there. But more importantly, you don't need to wait for him to start becoming who you were always meant to be. Choose yourself first. The right person will meet you there. Until next time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing in love, even when it's hard. See you in the next story. Soft piano music fades out.